So if that stops, then we'll read out loud, but hopefully it'll work, okay? So we're gonna start on page HT19. It says lesson 2 at the top. How does a historian work? So here's where we are right here, okay? So I'll give you a second to grab that if you don't already have it. And you may follow along in your book or on the screen, but I'm gonna show you this real quick. I'll show you how to get into it. In fact, I'm gonna go back here. Okay. Actually, want to get out of that. Okay. All right, here we go. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions along the way if you're lost or if you have a question. And then as we get going, if you can't hear it, somebody message me. If you can hear it, great, just let it go. But it's been working so fine today. All right. So if you have gotten onto your Clever badge, hopefully you know how to do that. You will see, actually, let me show you this. If it'll go for me. It'll reset. Okay. Oh no, it's not going to. Or actually here. Okay. So when you guys log into Clever, so this is what my page looks like, and here's my page with all of our links. But if you go down and you find the McGraw-Hill and you click on that, okay, then that'll take you to our online textbook. And you're going to go to your class period, which is period 4, and you're going to hit launch. And then you'll go to interactive student edition. Okay. And so it automatically went for me back to the last location, which is good. I don't have to, but you can, there's a bar over here that you can click on and it'll take you to the table of contents right here. Okay. All right. And somebody's joined. Hold on. Dylan's here. Okay. And then let me move you guys out of the way. And then over here is the audio. So if you're at home and you want to do this yourself, you can read it. So the audio voice goes along. It reads the title and it reads the questions, and then it goes through and it'll just follow what's on the page. Okay. So we're going to see if this works and just read along with it.
Essential question. How do we learn about the past? Lesson 2. How does a historian work? Asking questions. Guiding question. Why is it important to distinguish fact from opinion in historical writing? Analyzing key ideas and details. 1. Identifying steps. This section describes some of what a historian does to answer questions about the past. What are those steps? 2. Citing text evidence. How does a historian decide what information is relevant?
Okay, so it's asking questions. If you look in your book, there's questions on the side. We won't always stop to answer those, but it does read through those, so just follow along.
Sentence shows this. As we discussed earlier, historians are like detectives. They ask questions about the information they find from the past. Why did some nations go to war? How were the people affected by the war? How did events of the past change people's lives? Such questions help us focus on historical problems. By asking questions, historians can better identify the issues. They can also determine how and why these events happened and what the effects of these events were. Fact or opinion? Historical sources may contain facts and opinions. A fact can be proved or observed. An opinion, on the other hand, is a personal belief or conclusion. We often hear facts and opinions mixed in daily conversation, in advertising, in political debate, and in historical sources. Although some opinions can be supported by facts, in an argument they do not carry as much weight as facts. Sources such as letters, diaries, and speeches express personal views. That means they state what a person thinks about another person or event. As a result, a historian must be able to separate facts from opinions. In other words, they must separate truth about something from people's opinions about it. This skill is important because it helps the historian decide whether or not the information is accurate and if the historical source can be trusted. Making connections, perspectives, fact or opinion. Suppose you were a historian researching the history of the Pilgrims and the Thanksgiving holiday. You discovered this information. What in this account might be fact? What might be opinion? The Pilgrims began building their settlement at Plymouth in December 1620. They soon developed a friendship with the local Native Americans, who helped them grow crops and survive in their new land. In the fall of 1621, the colonists celebrated their first successful harvest, and Thanksgiving has since become America's favorite holiday.
Okay, really quickly, in this little excerpt right here. So most of this is fact. We have documentation that shows the Plymouth colony met Native Americans, they helped them out, they grew crops, and then they celebrated. What statement is an opinion though? It might be a widely held opinion, but which one is? Aiden, go ahead.
It's the last part that says Thanksgiving has since become America's favorite holiday.
Very good. So that might be true for a lot of people, but that's an opinion. That's not a fact. Okay, so good. Very good. All right, let's continue.
Is it relevant? Historians often must sift through a lot of information to find out what they need. As a result, they must determine whether or not each piece of evidence is relevant. This means selecting only the data that helps answer their research questions. Relevant information applies directly to the topic or purpose that the historian has chosen. For example, if you are researching family life in colonial America, information about marriage and children would be relevant information. A description of the colonial militia forces would not be relevant because it does not explain the types of families who lived in the American colonies. Before he was president, George Washington was a planter and a soldier. Is it important? In deciding whether information is relevant, historians also must figure out what information is essential or important, and what is incidental or unimportant. The fact that George Washington was a planter who owned enslaved people probably did not affect his abilities as a military leader. However, the fact that he served as a guide for British forces most likely did increase his military talents. Thinking like a historian. Analyzing information. Why is it important for historians to distinguish fact from opinion? Distinguishing fact and opinion. Imagine you were given a letter to use in your research. What sort of questions would you ask to determine what is fact versus what is opinion? What is the evidence? Guiding question. What types of evidence do historians use to understand the past? Analyzing key ideas and details. 1. Determining central ideas. What are the central ideas of this section? 2. Summarizing why are primary sources important for historians? One important question a historian must ask. A, is there supporting evidence? Another important task of the historian is to determine whether information in a source is verifiable. This means the historian must check to see if the information can be proved by other evidence already known to be truthful. Evidence is something that shows proof or an indication that something is true. Evidence could be in the form of material objects, such as a soldier's uniform or artifacts from an archaeological dig. Other evidence may appear in documents or written materials that were created during a historical event. Historians use the evidence they read in historical sources to interpret what happened in the past. Primary and secondary sources. Historians look for clues about the past in primary and secondary sources. Primary sources are first-hand pieces of evidence from people who saw or experienced the events described. Primary sources include written documents, such as letters, diaries, and official records. Literature or artwork from a particular time and place is a primary source. Spoken interviews and objects such as photos, tools, and clothing are also primary sources.
Okay, I want you to, you can't write in this book, but put a little sticky note on this page or a little bookmark, because this purple chart right here on this page is a good reference tool from later on when we evaluate sources, for you to come back if you can't remember what might all be a primary source. And some of these we already talked about, but there's a whole list of things here that are valuable as primary sources. So some of the things we didn't talk about are like cartoons and political cartoons, oral histories, tools. Somebody did mention artifacts, but tools and things that people used. And even nowadays, electronic sources like websites and that sort of thing. Okay, so keep track of this page. This is a great reference.
Secondary sources are created after the event. They are created by people who were not part of the historical event. The information in secondary sources is partially based on primary sources. Examples of secondary sources include biographies, history books, and textbooks. Historians study secondary sources for background information and for a larger view of an event. A historian must use primary sources, however, to find new evidence about a subject. Determining meaning. Look at primary sources and secondary sources. How can your knowledge of the meaning of primary and secondary help you remember what these terms mean? Maps as primary sources. Types of evidence, primary and secondary sources. Directions. You have been asked to help a historian write a scholarly article about early Greece. Sort the research materials into primary and secondary resources by dragging and dropping them into the correct place on the table.
You don't have to do that. You can ignore that.
Analyzing sources. Like a historian, when you read primary or secondary sources, you should ask yourself these questions as you read. Who created the source? Why was the source created? What was its purpose and for whom was it written? What is the source about? When was the source created? How is the source created? Is the source a primary or secondary source? Once historians identify this basic information, they examine the sources to determine if they are credible or truthful. This is because each source reflects a point of view. Analyzing sources.
Okay, I'm gonna stop really quickly. On this list right here, this analyzing sources, this is really important, and we will do this several times through the year when we look at documents and we're writing about things, is that you really have to, this is what we call sourcing a document. You have to ask who wrote it or who created it. It's important to know who the person is because you get an idea of where they're coming from. Why was the source created? Why did they write it or give a speech or take the picture or create the cartoon? What was happening in the time period that they created it? What is it about? When was it created? So the time frame, the time period, the year is important. How was it created? And again, is it a primary or secondary? So this thing right here, this how to analyze sources, we'll go over that many times. And so that's something important to remember.
Declaration of the Causes and Necessity of Taking Up Arms, July 6, 1775. As the American colonists and the British went to war at the start of the American Revolution, a group of colonists described some of the British actions that led to the conflict. Bracket, General Gages, and bracket, troops have butchered our countrymen, have wantonly burned Charlestown, besides a considerable number of houses in other places. Our ships and vessels are seized. The necessary supplies of provisions are intercepted, and he is exerting his utmost power to spread destruction and devastation around him. Analyzing sources. Assessing credibility. Examine the list under the heading Evaluating the Credibility of Sources. How does this statement rate? Identifying perspectives. How would you discover another point of view? Point of view. A point of view is a general attitude about people and life. The creator of a source has a point of view that selects which events to focus on, who the key players are, and which details are worth recording. A point of view is the particular focus a person takes when considering a problem or situation. Bias. Sometimes a returner's point of view is expressed as a bias, or an unreasoned judgment about people and events. A bias is a one-sided, unexamined view. A person who is biased has made a judgment about an event, a person, or a group without really considering the many parts of the situation. Biased speakers and writers can be detected in various ways. Their statements use opinions or emotional words such as stupid, ignorant, impossible, great, and wonderful. They also tend to use words that allow no exception, such as all, always, and never. Evaluating the credibility of sources. The more times you can answer a say to the following questions about a primary or secondary source, the more credible and reliable you may consider the source. Are facts supported with evidence? Is the language objective and not emotional? Can the same information be found in another source? Is the source's creator reputable, or does he or she have credentials that would suggest credibility? Does the author or speaker acknowledge other viewpoints? Multiple perspectives. Historians seek to uncover point of view and bias in historical documents and articles. They look for the ideas and facts that the author of the source emphasizes. They also think about what ideas and facts the author might be leaving out. To make sense of the past, historians must weigh the known evidence and try to figure out what the facts are. Then they need to bring the facts together to answer the questions that interest them. In doing this, they must use their judgment. This means that their own viewpoints come into play. Historians try to be aware of point of view and bias both in their sources and in themselves. Therefore, they check news sources and their own ideas against sources already known to be trustworthy. To get a balanced picture, historians study documents that present other points of view. It is important to consider multiple perspectives, or different views, of a historical event. Not all people or groups of people experience the same event in the same way. Good historians piece together different perspectives of an event to help them interpret history. In this way, they are able to get a clearer, well-rounded view of events that occurred. Thinking like a historian. Summarizing. What is a historian's job when looking at primary sources? Describing. What are some ways you can identify bias in a source? Interpreting history. Guiding question. Why do historians draw different conclusions about events of the past? Analyzing key ideas and details. Summarizing according to this section. How have errors and change affected history?
Okay, I'm going to stop for a second because I know we've been reading for several minutes. We are almost done. I'm going to let you stand up for a minute, take a stretch. If you need to run to the bathroom, get a drink of water, whatever, come back in 2 minutes. Okay, 2 minutes. All right, everybody come on back. I hope that break was helpful for you. Sometimes we will read a whole lesson together, and sometimes I will just assign a reading to you. Okay, we won't read like this every day in class. Sometimes we will. Okay, we're gonna back up to interpreting history, and we're almost done for today.
More than facts. You may have heard the phrase, the facts speak for themselves. Historians do not think that facts alone explain history. Like pieces of a puzzle, the facts have to be put together by people using their reason in order to explain events. In the same way, historians must use their knowledge to give historical facts, names, dates, places, and events, meaning, and put them in an order that people can easily understand. Historians piece together the credible evidence and draw conclusions. They use their own thinking and knowledge of the past to interpret or explain the meaning of events. Then, they present their findings in a clear, readable, and convincing form, providing a setting. As we have discussed, historians look at people and events in the setting of time and place. They connect historical people and events to central issues. These central issues are the main ideas, or patterns, that we see in human societies. These include war and peace, the rise of scientific and technological inventions, and the forms of government and societies. Through these links, historians can grasp the whole picture. Sequencing events. Historians also sequence events, or place events in the order in which they occurred. Certain key words say such as first, next, last, then, before, and after. I can help you understand the sequence of a story or a timeline of events. Sequencing helps historians organize information. From the pattern of the data, they can determine how events are related to each other. The relationship among these events can help historians identify historical importance and
Oh my goodness. This always happens. It fails. Okay, so let's continue. We're almost done. We're on cause and effect, and I'll just go ahead and finish reading that. Historical events are linked by cause and effect. A cause is what makes an event happen. The result of cause is known as an effect. Historians look for cause and effect links to explain why events happen. Usually, one event is produced by many causes. Similarly, one event often produces several different effects. The link between cause and effect is called a cause and effect relationship. These relationships explain why things happen. The diagram below shows a simple cause and effect relationship. So in this little box right here, a king rules his people harshly. That's the cause. The effect is the people overthrow the king. Now, when we get to the American colonies and the Revolutionary War and the events that led up to the war, we're going to talk about this a lot. I'm going to give you a whole list, and we're going to discuss each one individually of what did the king and parliament do, what was the cause, and then how did the colonists react, what was the effect. So that's a huge in our upcoming units. Because many historical events are related, cause and effect chains can become very long and include events over a long period of time. Look for clue words that alert you to cause and effect relationships, such as because, led to, brought about, produced, and therefore. Okay, and we're going to stop right here. I want you to put a little sticky note right here or a little bookmark on change and continuity. We're going to pick that up on Monday. And there's that page and 3 more pages. We might read some together and then I might assign the rest. So we'll figure that out on Monday. So just mark your book right there, okay? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay. One last thing I want to tell you before I let you go for the day is I'm getting some emails from students who are trying to turn in your timeline to Otis and you're having a hard time with it. Remember, I said to you, do not try to turn it in. We're not there yet. Just do it and just hang on to it. If it's a hard copy, just hang on to it. If it is a Google Drive or Google Slides, actually, I did have somebody share with me on my email a Google slide and it was really, really good. So, but don't worry about turning it into Otis right now. Don't borrow that frustration, okay? We're not there yet. Lily, you have your hand up. Did you have a question?
When is the presentation thing due again?
The timeline is due next Friday. Yeah, you have a whole week. Yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, anybody else have any other questions? Everybody okay? All right. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and let you go early today for you to work on your timeline a little bit, or if you have other homework for other classes. And I will see you Monday. You guys, I know you have 2 more classes, but you have earned your weekend. So good job. Thank you. See you later.